Welcome to Pedagogy of a Portrait, Episode 3. Today we're going to talk about connected learners. My name is Dina Wright. I'm the Content Area Specialist for Technology Integration for Lyon County School District, and I am joined by some lovely colleagues, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, Dina. Thanks for having us back again. My name is Carrie Bunyard, and I'm MTSS Academic Support for the district.
Dina, thanks for having me on the podcast. My name's Tammy Roseberry. I am one of the MTSS coordinators for the district.
And my name is Damon Escher, and I am the PD manager and data manager for Lyon County School District.
Well, thanks for joining me today. Just a little bit of background. Lyon County School District is located in northern Nevada, about an hour from Lake Tahoe. Our district consists of about 50,000 people and serves 18 schools and about 5,000 students. And that essentially includes 5 smaller communities, currently being the largest, then Dayton, Garrington, Silver Springs, and Smith Valley. And the purpose of this podcast is to create a place for all the witness of lifelong learning, create a community that empowers teachers and stakeholders with resources that will lead to problem solving, exploring, and finding the joy in learning. And we are going to have some fun and hopefully provide some inspiration and motivation while doing so. So our last episode, we discussed the first domain of our Portrait of a Learner, which was learning for life. And those of you who didn't get a chance to listen, we briefly discussed our district vision, Portrait of a Learner, and its history. So LCSD represents each one of our domains, and last episode we discussed L, which again is learning for life, and today we're going to discuss the C, which is connected learners. The competencies within this domain include belonging, communication, and collaboration. So this domain is all about relationships. So we're going to kind of go through those competencies. And the first one is belonging. I was reading this quote by James Cromer, an author of Significant Relationships in Social Pedagogy. And it is no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. So I wanted to get your thoughts on this quote.
I would happen to agree with the quote. I think there's a version of that quote from a lot of our different pedagogy people, right? So I remember Madeline Hunter with that they don't care what you know until they know that you care, right? Same type of thing. You have to build the relationship before they're ready to learn from you.
I always go back to everything I keep repeating, which actually I'm going to give Brooke. Brooke is with our UNR group, who supports us through MTSS coaching and so forth. And I always go back to one of the things we work on is we can create relationships and those safe learning environments. Like you're saying, if they need to know you care. So ways you show that you care is by being consistent and predictable, by being positive, and then creating that safety. And so I always go back to, like, if we're not, it's hard to build a relationship with someone when you're not predictable or consistent, especially in teaching. If we're all over the place and changing our rules or we're doing things differently every time, that creates a lack of trust, which makes me squirrel Covey's work. They were coming through and doing some work with us. Stephen Covey talks about 7 habits of highly effective adults. And we also have a book for teens too. But one of the things they talked about with building trust was in order to build trust, you have to have character and competency. So you have to know your work and what you're doing, and people have to believe that you know how to do your job. But then you also have to develop character. And the only way you get to know someone's character is by building those trusting relationships with that person. So they start, as they get to know you, that builds, like, helps them understand who you are as a person and the character that you have, and vice versa. The student also, you get to build that with the student. But then that builds that trust in that relationship. So as long as you have competency and character, that then drives towards building those relationships.
Yeah, and I think for education to be effective, we have to make it personal, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
And I think continuing those relationships throughout the whole year. You know, sometimes I think we spend a lot of time at the beginning of the year getting to know our students and, you know, doing the community builders, but staying consistent, like you said, throughout, because things change and, you know, their lives may change a little bit, or yours, and things in the classroom, you know, you have new students moving in and out. And so just continuing building those relationships and yeah, staying consistent.
Yeah, and when there's that belonging, there's also that sense of well-being, which leads to that academic engagement, which then leads to that buy-in, right? For students to want to be there, to want to learn, to want to do better. Awesome.
When I go back to if you're not prepared for your lesson that day, again, that goes back to predictability and consistency, but then that hurts your credibility. So if we're looking at character or competency, then that hurts your competency. So then the students don't want to invest in you or trust you because you're not prepared. So it goes back, even those simple things as a teacher, just being prepared for your lesson that day develops that competence which builds trust. So,
have you ever had those moments where you're like, oh my gosh, like I was not, you think maybe you're prepared, but you were not fully prepared, and it just turns into this chaotic
Turns into some
moment,
chaos.
right? And then you can tell you're like losing the kids. You're like, oh no. And so then you have to build back that trust, like you said.
Like, oh shoot, I forgot to make one extra copy, and we're just going to be flexible now. And you're like trying to get, trying to.
Well, and I think that we're human too. I don't think it's a bad thing for our students to see our humanness, and for us to point it out. Hey, I meant to do this, and this isn't going well, so now we're going to pivot to that. I think sometimes when we can model some self-regulation, that helps our students when they're unregulated too. So I think, just being human and being honest about that, I think is good. And like you said, the sense of belonging. None of us want to be any place that we don't feel like people want us or that we belong. So creating that sense of belonging is really important for our students and our staff.
But I think I'm going to go back to predictability and consistency. Like if you're consistently not prepared, again, that's where that competency comes in. But if you're consistently prepared and you have a bad day, I think your kids are forgiving. At least I've always had that. Like we're human, like you said, it's never going to go perfect every day. But that's where, again, if you're consistent with being competent, then your kids are forgiving on that piece.
So let's talk about next, collaboration and communication. What are some tools and strategies that we can share with others to use in their classroom? So
I was looking at the Portrait Learner strategies, which we'll link this in the descriptions below. But one of the things I see, it says is I can communicate. This is again a student action or student success statement, as they're calling it. I can communicate to resolve conflict. And I know as a VP, that was one thing I did a lot of. One of my favorite things to do is mediations, where you would have a conflict between two people. And again, especially in that age group, they don't have the abilities to figure out how to communicate with each other. And so one thing I love doing, again, to resolve conflict was bringing them together, but then facilitating and modeling what that conversation could look like, of listening first and then listening to understand and then listening to resolve the conflict. And so the mediation process I usually started with was kind of bringing both agreeing parties together and then having one person kind of present what they saw or what they experienced, then express like, how did you feel after that situation? And then what were you wanting when that was going on? What was your intent? What was your thinking? And then when you flip it to the other side, this is again summarizing a very complex conversation, but when you flip to the other side, again, having them say, what did you see happen? What did you feel when it was happening? And then after hearing the other side, is that what you were intending to have happen? And usually what I saw with kids is when they got to that point of, is that what your intent was? Usually it wasn't. Usually it was like, well, I thought it was funny, and so I did it to be funny. When they heard the other side, well, no, that was hurtful. Then you kind of saw some empathy building, which is awesome to watch. And then and then at the end, we kind of go back to then, so what do you guys both need to move forward? So it's kind of good, like one person said, I'd love an apology, and just not to have that happen again. And the other side would say, well, I'm seeking forgiveness for what I did. So it's always really cool when you kind of give students the ability to communicate in a structured way to figure out ways to resolve their conflicts, because they don't always have the skills to do that. And so as adults coming in and providing that structure and that scaffolding, I think is super helpful.
I love that too, where you have students who learn to advocate for themselves. I think one thing that's always been difficult for me is learning how to not have a predetermined course of action, right? Like, oh, an apology would be great. Like, you just need to apologize. Like, because some students don't need an apology, right? So like, what do you need to move forward? And then letting that be authentic as to what they need and not putting my thoughts into that. That was always hard for me. Like, just making sure that the students were able to voice their own, have it be their student voice and not my voice. That was heard.
Yeah, that's good.
No, I like that idea also of like at the beginning of the year, practicing or role playing.
Yeah.
Because, sometimes, if you say, well, just go play, just go work it out. You guys go work it out yourselves. They may not know the skills. And that's where some of those, like you were just talking about, how'd that make you feel? Or she said this, or I meant this. And so that communication, but practicing those throughout the year at different, times and places, whether it's on the playground or in the hallways or in the lunchroom. And so I think that's important.
Teach twos. That's such a great strategy. Yeah.
And that modeling is
Yeah.
huge, right?
Yeah.
What does this actually look like? And
Right.
what does this actually sound like?
Because sometimes we have to teach them those things also. They may not come with those skills.
And when also, if we're shifting gears to, academics and we're talking about communication, that even goes to back to those essential questions, right?
Yeah.
The learning criteria. What are they expected to know and learn? So then they can, show you exactly what they have learned when it comes to that point in time.
It's like achievement conferences. Like, I love those conferences where the kid comes in and tells the parent, here's what I'm learning. Here's how I know I've learned it. And communicate it to the parents they're learning. It's so powerful.
I think the National Educators for Restorative Practices, they have a connection toolkit, which is a really easy lift for educators to use in their classrooms. So they have 6 different strategies that they can teach you. Strategies are pretty easy. There's a 60-second relate break, which gives just 60 seconds for students to kind of turn and talk to each other and then focus back on the teacher. You answer last in that case to bring the focus back to you. 2-minute connections, stand and share different things on different topics. 90-second spark. There's also like a pulse meter where you're looking at emotion and social aspects in the classroom. Having a treatment agreement. So a lot of times we build a contract with our students. Treatment agreement is a specific type of contract that you build with your students. And then just get to know you circles. Just so that people can start to relate on, very surface connection with each other. But it's a way to get started.
Yeah, and when you have that communication and you have those in place, then you can move into that deeper collaboration, right, with academics or actually socially as well. Really where you can, you're working individually on a project, you're doing independent work, you can still learn a lot of content, but then when you get into that collaboration space, you can take it to the next level, right? That's where you're really learning more deeply, expanding ideas and seeing each other's perceptions and growing from what you've learned and of each other.
Yeah. And as we have to negotiate for meaning, right, we have to have vocabulary and social aspects in our learning. And as we engage with each other, we have to negotiate for that meaning, and then we have to allow for people to have a different opinion than ours or try to track something different. And I think there's a lot of learning that comes with that. So that collaboration piece is really important for our students.
And I was thinking another strategy you can use at any grade level is having those starter statements. So one of the things when I would do I taught government, and so we would have mini debates in the class about Supreme Court cases or things with regards to when we got to the court systems and looking at things like that. So Tinker versus Des Moines, Iowa School District about your free speech rights within a school setting and looking at that, staple of a case. But I would start with question steps. One of the things I always had my students do is they would have a list of ways to respond. But one thing I always put in there was, I disagree with my kind colleague. And I always made them say that first if they disagreed, because they had to show a sign of respect of I still see you as a human and I still care for you, but I disagree with your thought. And so it was kind of a way, and they always thought it was the goofiest thing to do, but it totally, you could see the tone change of I gotta respect my colleague, but here's my thinking on this topic. But giving them those question stems to start with was really helpful because it helped drive that conversation and gave them vocabulary of how to communicate or start a conversation.
And you can even do that at the younger grades too. I remember doing the same saying accountable talk in
Yeah.
second grade.
Yeah.
I respectfully disagree.
Right. Well, it's that same thing, right? The accountable talk, but I also think that expressive language is one of the last pieces of language that we get. And so expressive language can be hard to pull from. So for our EL kids or our kids who have disabilities, they may have trouble coming up with the words that they want to use. So a STEM kind of helps them, it frames that for them, so then they can put in the piece that they're talking about. So sentence stems and things like that really help us with our expressive language.
So let's dive a little deeper around collaboration. Can you think of a time where collaboration actually led to an unexpected outcome?
I was thinking, so there's this thing called Instructional Consultation Assessment Teams, ICAT, if anyone remembers that. But I remember one of the things we had to do with ICAT was we had to pick a warm fuzzy. And so Julie Baumgartner, shout out to Julie Baumgartner, principal at Dayton High School. But she came to me, she had to do a case. And so she came to me to collaborate. And so I selected a student who was struggling in my AP US history class. And so we collaborated around, we did some instructional assessments, so we did some reading assessments to see how the student was doing. We found the student was doing really well with reading, but it was around comprehension. And so all we did was we did some note-taking strategies. So through collaboration with Julie, we found some note-taking strategies to give to the student. And then that student actually went from failing the class to passing the class. And a lot of that had to do just with starting a conversation with the student, collaborating with Julie and collaborating with the student to find some strategies. And then the student was finding success in the class. And again, I don't know how much of that, a kind of unintended consequence, I don't know how much of that was the strategy we picked or just the relationship building that kind of came out of it, that the kid realized, hey, these two people care about me. So I better, get working. And so maybe there's a combination of both. But I think that collaboration created an unintended, to me, it was just a warm fuzzy to help Julie out, but then it really benefited the kid in the end. And it was an awesome outcome.
I enjoyed the collaboration around partnerships with teachers and ICAT as well. I think for me, thinking in terms of students, really I did yearbook with elementary school students and really allowing them to collaborate on okay, we have to have this section. What do you want this section to look like? And really kind of stepping back and letting the students talk and negotiate with each other about what that should look like. And then the outcome was completely different than what I had envisioned, right? And the yearbooks that they put together were truly their own yearbooks. And you can see each, for 3 or 4 years, the difference in the book between the different sets of kids as they went through. I think that collaboration piece, right, made it, somebody offered something and then everybody had a little different take. And by the end, they were able to come together and decide what they wanted to do. And a lot of times it was completely different than what I had intended. And so letting go of that can be really hard. But the joy of just oh, wow, they really took ownership of it. And then coming out with a product that was probably better than what I would have come up with on my own.
All right. So I was also thinking with the students in my class also, I was thinking in a writing project or when they got to peer edit or work together on their math, helping each other out. And they would get excited. They would come up and say, well, so-and-so helped you with this. And I was able to figure this out because of, she showed me a different way to do this or whatever. And so just that piece of collaboration. But then also I remember some students would finish their writing assignments or units earlier than others. And I would encourage them, well, you guys can write something else or you can do this or, give them some different options and different genres that they could be writing about. And they would come up with their own things. Can we write a comic book? And we're going to do this together. And so I think that that was really fun and exciting for them to come up with their own ideas, and they would still want to work on it together. It would be something, again, like you said, Tammy, that you never expected. They would have this work that they worked together on and produce, their book or their writing. And so, sometimes I think we forget about that. We want them to do this, this, and this. We forget about those open-ended projects or those things that they come up with on their own. They've got lots of really good ideas. And so,
Yeah, and that's what we want them to do, right? When they have those experiences and those moments where they can share their ideas or help expand others with their ideas.
and then they'll continue on with like, okay, how can we publish this? Or can I type it up? Or can I make a book? Can I color this? Can I put a cover on it? Or whatever it was. They come up with so many different ideas of what maybe you don't expect. So that is exciting.
I had two of my first grade students. We did a lot of writing. We published a book in class together. And when they were teenagers, they worked together and published a book on Amazon. One was the author and one was the illustrator. And I found it through a friend and bought the book, and then they both signed it. Really kind of exciting, right? And they talked about how, we became authors back in first grade. And just kind of seeing that collaboration piece happen again later on when they were teenagers was very neat.
Yeah, when you give them those opportunities, your hope is for that to transfer into all the other areas, what other teachers or content areas, or even outside the school building.
Yeah. Well, and I was just thinking of another strategy. I was thinking of Monica Koppel, who's at Silver Stage Middle School. And she does a lot of collaborative group around her math lessons. So like she'll have multiple whiteboards up and then she groups kids together and then they problem solve and they collaborate together to work through a math problem. And then she's bouncing around from station to station, providing feedback to the students. But in the end, the group has to justify their answer and why they came up with it. So I want to give a shout out to her because I know that's a great way to create collaboration within your classroom as well. So I think she's kind of modeling that too.
Good job, Monica. Some of that productive struggle.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of, I was thinking, it's funny that you say that, Damon. I was thinking about whole group math discussions and math talks where we would have students explain the different strategies that they used, right? And then students would come up with, I used, so-and-so strategy of repeated addition to solve this multiplication problem, so like whatever it was, very, that there's a collaboration piece there because they think a little bit differently, and then they're able to help their colleagues, their peers.
And actually the guy from Covey, Gabe, he presented kind of the same idea as Mana, what she's doing, but they would also get around collaboration. The kids would go up to a math problem and they'd have to do it incorrectly. So the first round was incorrect, but they'd have to put a strategy or something they did wrong within the solving of the problem. Then they would rotate stations, and then the next group then had to figure out what was wrong and what they would do differently or how they would teach that person to correct the error. So I thought that's another cool strategy to create collaboration is that productive struggle, create a productive struggle situation, and then have the kids collaborate around how would you then teach that person to do it correctly next time. So just really cool strategies out there that facilitate collaboration that isn't teacher-centered and giving these kids the ability to think.
I was just thinking, like we talked about portrait last week, and we're talking about connected learners this week as well. And it's just, I really like how it just encompasses everything that a lot of teachers are already doing. So I'm not sure that it's anything that's really like new, but it's just a lot of things that we already do in our classes. And so it's just really exciting to see how it all kind of fits in, and we can talk about different strategies and things that are happening and things that we're seeing in the district and across the classroom. So that's really exciting.
A lot of leaders will tell us the same thing, Carrie, that, this isn't anything new. When we look at like new research and things like that, it's not anything new. It's just how purposeful and intentional we are with putting it into our classrooms, right? So what's our intention? And not just like throwing it in whenever, but being very intentional and purposeful about how we use these strategies in our practices, I think is what's important.
Not just adding one more thing to do.
All right, so now it's time for question and answer. Since our last podcast, we've gotten several questions coming in. We're going to share two today. The first one is, where can I find the strategies for connecting with students? Those 6 proactive tools that you actually already mentioned earlier in the podcast. Tim, you probably have the answer for this.
I do have the answer for this. So In my email line, I have an interactive PowerPoint, and people can click on that, and then they can go to different areas, and you can find the tools there. Another easy way is you can email me, and I'll just send you the link. So either way, you can find the link yourself, or you can ask me for it.
Awesome. And again, it's 6 proactive tools to build some
connection in the classroom. So they call it 6 connections toolkit. It's a connection toolkit, and then there's 6 strategies within their toolkit. And if you just Google National Educators for Restorative Practice, 6 strategies connection toolkit, it'll come up online as well.
Cool, awesome, thank you. And the next question is, what is Grow Your Own? We get a lot of emails coming through congratulating new
inductees
inductees. And so if you could explain a little bit about Grow Your Own and what it actually really is.
Yeah, so I really want to highlight this because it is such a great program for a lot of our classified employees and active substitutes. So if you are a classified employee, so parapro, a substitute, custodial staff, like anything under the classified employee category, and you would like to become a teacher, like teaching's been something you're thinking about, then Grow Your Own's for you. The idea with Grow Your Own is it is a 2-year scholarship. The hope is that you have your associate's degree. And then basically what the district does is you'll apply. We usually run our new cohorts in September and then in April. So we have an April deadline coming up right after the end of spring break. And what you do is apply, and if you are accepted into the program, then basically you're agreeing that you're going to get your bachelor's degree in the next 2 years. And then basically Lyon County School District will pay up to $9,700 per year for you to acquire your bachelor's degree and your teaching certificate. So it's an easy way for you to become a teacher and not have any costs associated with you on that. We help pay for your books. We'll help pay for your first round of praxis assessments to get those done. And then the cool thing is that the health benefits continue to get paid while you're doing your demo teaching when eligible. And then if you are doing an unpaid internship, there's some additional stipends that you can get as well. Again, all depending on everyone's situation. But it's just a really great way to become a teacher and then not have those additional costs associated with you. The other part to it too is once you do get your teaching degree, you agree to teach in Lyon County School District for 3 years, and then you're covered. So I think it's a great way to, again, become a teacher but not have the financial burden that's associated with getting that degree. So I don't know, any questions? Or
how many Grow Your Own people have we?
We have had, I believe, off the top of my head, 12 cohorts. So I don't remember the total number of people, but we've had at least 5 people in each cohort, which is kind of cool. So we've been growing our own teachers along the way. Like I said, we do have our next deadline coming up the Monday at midnight after spring break. So I encourage you to apply as we want to, again, grow our own and get more teachers into our classrooms. So.
An amazing opportunity.
Yeah.
So we're going to wrap this up. We are in the home stretch of this school year. We just got through March Madness. Hopefully you all had a lovely spring break. We are wishing you a strong finish to the end of the year. And don't forget to connect with your learners. Remember, it's all about that belonging, communication, collaboration, and again, circling back to last time in our podcast number 2, Learning for Life. So we're going to finish with a fun game. Would you rather?
Would you rather color with crayons, markers, colored pencils, or paint?
I like to outline with markers and color with crayons.
I don't like any of them because they're all messy.
I knew you were going to say that.
I do have to say
pick one.
I kind of like crayons only because you can do different. I think you can do the same with paint, but for me, in my skill level, I think crayons just because you can do different shadings, but it's not as messy, like it's contained. Whereas paint would get everywhere, pencils break all the time, crayons you can just keep going. and then markers run out. So there we go. So crayons it is for me. Welcome to my brain.
I would say colored pencils, but I do have to say when we used to do Project Glad and we do the big pictorials, I got introduced to chalk, watercolor chalk. And watercolor chalk is my favorite, but it is super, super messy.
Nope.
I like having a pencil first. Can I say two? Or you said two, right?
Kinda.
Because there's an eraser. And then I do like paint. You can mix so many different colors to be,
Creative. I love
Do you use a paintbrush or your fingers?
Oh, paintbrush.
Dave just cringed when I said fingers.
But there's always boo-boo tape.
That's a new term I learned this year.
Correction tape.
Correction tape. Again, elementary speaking.
You can't say that in secondary.
All right, so next time, join us. We will be talking about the S in our Portrait of a Learner, Domain S, student ownership of learning. And those competencies are empowerment, self-knowledge, and self-direction. And we will probably be coming to you with another special guest. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you.
Stay strong and keep teaching.